Hello and welcome to the interview on France 24. My guest today is the EU counter-terrorism coordinator. Gilles de Kerchove has a daunting task of coordinating the anti-terrorism policies of the 27 member states and of ensuring that the EU plays an active role in the fight against terrorism. Mr. de Kerchove, welcome to the interview on France 24.
Hello, thank you.
Let's start with the arrest in Birmingham in England of 6 men who were charged on Sunday for terrorism-related offences. Now, according to the UK police, 3 of them were planning what they call a bombing campaign. They say this is potentially very serious. How serious is it, and does it really show that homegrown terrorism remains a threat to Europe?
Unfortunately, I don't have the details, so I cannot that much comment on that arrest. But it just reinforced the changing nature of the threat. We're no longer very much subject to attack plot from outside the European Union, and more either Europeans having been on hotspot like Yemen, Somalia or Afghanistan, Pakistan, and coming back to mount attack, or people just radicalized in Europe and who have no contacts with the organization. Using explosives, that's the most used modus operandi. And so that is something which our services are looking very closely at.
And yet, according to the British police, 2 of these men received some kind of training in Pakistan, so it shows that there is still a lot of travelling. Now, let's talk about the role of the intelligence services in Europe, because the feeling we get is that since the Madrid bombing in 2004 and the London attacks in 2005, there haven't been major, luckily I should say, of course, major attacks on European soil. Is this a consequence of the improvement of our security services?
No doubt, no doubt. There is a sea change in the way the services exchange information, intelligence among themselves and within each and every country with the police and the prosecution service and the custom. So it's really different, and that has helped a lot to foil many plots, indeed.
And your role, of course, as coordinator is to coordinate this work.
My role, I'm not at all operational myself, so I'm not involved in day-to-day operations, but it's more to make sure that we have the necessary frameworks and encourage the Commission, the European Parliament, the Council, but also the Member States to have that sort of response. Let's take one example, fusion centers. I am trying to convince the 27 Member States to have a fusion center where they pull all the information together.
But is it really working? I mean, are they sharing a critical information?
It is working very well, and we're working very well with the Americans as well.
Now, let's talk also about September 11. Of course, there was the ceremony in New York. We all saw it, of course, on September 11. Now, 10 years after the terrible attack on Twin Towers in New York and 4 months after the death of Osama bin Laden, what is the state of Al-Qaeda?
As I have said, the threat has changed. It's much more diversified and complex. AQ core, Al-Qaeda core in Afghanistan, more in Pakistan, Zawiristan, North Waziristan, has been very seriously degraded. And therefore, they are much less able to mount a sophisticated attack like the one on 9/11. But the AQ has been regionalized in a way through franchises like AQAP in Yemen, AQIM in the Sahel, AQ in Iraq, or Al-Shabaab. Not really a franchise, but more a sort of affiliate group. That is one trend. These are groups with regional agenda, but for some of them want to target Europe or the United States. But also you have foreign fighters. We just mentioned that, people leaving Europe for the jihad and to be trained, and for some of them to come back and mount attack in Europe. And homegrown, the lone wolf, with no direct connection with AQ or with one of the franchise, but who gets radicalized on internet and decide to mount attack where he can and when he can.
As you said, let's take the example of Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. It's one of the branches of Al-Qaeda. We understand now it's targeting people or Western interests locally, regionally. Yeah. Will they ultimately try to target Europe as well?
They are not so far, but that's one serious concern we have, and especially the French. But so far, they are mainly targeting the different states, Mauritania, for instance, Mali, Niger. They are targeting our embassies or interests. You have citizens of European citizens who have been kidnapped. Some are still kidnapped from the French company Arriva, and therefore it's a serious problem for the countries themselves, because it prevents them from developing, especially in the northern part of the country, because no development worker is ready to go in northern Mali, nor Niger, and as you know, it's among the poorest in the world, if not the poorest.
Another cause of concern, of course, is the situation around Somalia. We've seen pirates seizing hostages recently.
So far, we thought there were no direct link between Al-Shabaab and pirates, but more and more information tend to suggest that at least they get part of the ransom because they control some of the harbors over there.
But how efficient is our fight against this phenomenon?
Efficient on piracy, we deployed a military operation to police the sea there and around Aden. But of course, we have to address the root causes and work on development. It's for the humanitarian crisis, which is very terrible. But we are about to adopt a strategy. Mrs. Ashton will go soon to the Council to present a strategy which looks at all aspects, like we have done in Sahel. Not only beefing up the security response, but tackling the root cause and working on development at the same time.
Now, you raise an important point, of course, it's ransoms, because a lot of these groups ask for ransoms. From what we know, sometimes these ransoms are paid, but then in return you do finance the organizations.
Indeed. So ransoms are one of the main sources of financing for AQIM. And that's the reason why one has to make sure that there isn't any ransom paid. Organized crime, trafficking in drugs is another source of financing as well.
Let's go back to Europe. In your view, has Europe become a safer place than it was in 2001?
It has indeed. As I've said, the threat is more diversified and complex, but at the same time, the response has improved a lot. We mentioned data sharing, data collection, but we have developed new tools like Joint Investigation Team. We have EU players like Europol, Eurojust, the European Arrest Warrant, the Evidence Warrant. I won't go into the detail, but in Europe, but in our relation with the United States, it's a very close relationship. So it has helped a lot, preventing a lot of plots. The one you just suggested, Birmingham, but we have in France, in Belgium, in Denmark, in Sweden, in Spain, in Germany, many plots foiled by our services.
Now, you recently declared that the military intervention in Libya had offered a huge opportunity for Al-Qaeda. What do you mean exactly?
It was a bit more nuanced. What I said is that, of course, the support to the rebels is excellent because it helped them to move to democracy, and we're very much in favor of that. NATO was very much involved, as you know. It's more one aspect is that Gaddafi had huge arms and ammunition and arsenal, and of course, in this troubled time, some of the arsenals are looted and arms are accessible to many people.
Do you have evidence that they fell into the wrong hands?
Small arms, yes. 500 kilos of Semtex have been seized by the Nigerian police going to AQIM. Small arms, we know. For more sophisticated weapons, there is still it is still unclear, and we're working on it. Some states are already present in Libya and in the region to assess the state of play. And I think what we need to do is quickly start what we call DDR, disarmament, the reintegration of the rebels coming back home. You know that some Tuaregs are back in Niger, back in Mali. Workers are back as well. So we need to support that process very quickly.
Now, in July, Anders Breivik traumatized his country, Norway, after killing 77 people in Oslo and on the island of Utøya, including a lot of young people. Suddenly, Europeans discovered that radical Islamists were not alone in perpetrating acts of evil, acts of terror. What lessons has Europe drawn from this new type of terrorism on its soil?
Well, first, that it's very difficult to prevent a so-called lone wolf from committing an attack, especially if you cannot detect any connection with someone else. We need to explore whether the work we have done on preventing the process of radicalization for AQ-related terrorism applies to right-wing or left-wing extremism. And last week, ministers of interior in Europe had a quite good discussion on that subject.
And yet, as you said, lone wolves is not something you can spot very easily.
Of course, there are some action that you can take. We are currently negotiating a draft regulation on the use and the marketing of explosive precursors to make it more difficult to get access to the most sensitive precursors. Working on monitoring suspicious transaction, working on payments. We discovered that Breivik had opened a lot of bank accounts. So all the work we are currently doing on prevent may help, but in the end, an attack may happen. There is nothing like 100% security.
Gilles de Kerchove, EU Counter-Terrorism Coordinator, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And thank you for watching this edition of The Interview on France 24. Please stay on our channel for more news. From all of us here, goodbye.